So ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce the participants in the upcoming discussion. Barbara Kolm, the president of the Hayek Institute in Austria, funding director of the Austrian Economic Center, and also member of the Austrian Parliament of FPÖ, who I met 2 weeks ago in Warsaw. Ernst Rötz, an author and filmmaker, an Afrikaner from South Africa, who was sitting a year ago in my same panel. And last but not least, please welcome Stefan Bartulica, who is a member of the European Parliament and also representing the Domino Party, who I met just a week ago in Brussels. So I'm telling you the truth, this cooperation is working. Welcome our panelists. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for accepting our invitation. As I told you earlier, we have to be very quick and dynamic. And I will ask you, to all of you, very general questions. We had quite a year in 2024. Actually, we increased our support as conservative and patriotic forces within the European Parliament. We are not there yet, but we are always closer to victory and to the occupation of Brussels. And what really have boosted the Western conservative cooperation is the presidential victory of Donald Trump, and which is not only the presidential victory, but he won with a landslide, the House, the Senate, and all of the 7 swing states. And what do you think, ladies and gentlemen, what would be the impact of this very strong message from the Western conservatives, the gaining support? How would the future look like for us in the short time? Barbara, ladies first, please.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. The future will look bright if we keep up the good fight. The fight for freedom and the fight against those central planners out of Brussels. I think those are the most important things, and if we have shining examples, whether it's here in Hungary or whether it's across the pond in the United States, where people understand what freedom and liberty really means and why we need to defend those values, we will go ahead. And as you mentioned before, we met 2 weeks ago in Warsaw at a think tank meeting. It's not only the think tanks that are do tanks as well, but it's a joint forces between the academics, the think tankers, but also the political parties. And this has become much bigger over the past years. The more socialism, the more communism we saw in Europe, the better it got, the better the cooperation and the division of labor from our side became. And I think this is important to keep up that as well. Thank you.
Ernst, how does it look like from a South African perspective?
So I think firstly, looking at what happened in America and what's happening in Europe, and looking at conferences like these, what really gives me hope is that the Western world and the international conservative movement is realizing that it's up to us to protect what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful from our past if we want to preserve it for our descendants. And so from a South African perspective, we, the Afrikaner people and Western communities living in South Africa, are the last Western outpost on the African continent, and we are very committed to stay, and we are very committed to ensure a future for our people in the southern tip of the African continent, where we have been for hundreds of years. Since before the Declaration of Independence, we've been in Africa, and so we need to ensure a future there, and part of the route to that future, we believe, is a rediscovery of our Western roots and making friends in the Western world. And the momentum that we see picking up in the Western world, in America and in Europe, is also good news for Westerners living in South Africa, and for that we are grateful.
Thank you. And let's get back to Central Europe. Stefan, you're coming from Croatia. How does the future look like for Croatian conservatives?
Well, I want to first thank CPAC Hungary, the organizers, the Center for Fundamental Rights, for their kind invitation. I'm always delighted to be in Budapest. And Croatia, yes, we've been fighting for years to promote an agenda of common sense, also to fight for our national sovereignty. You know, Croatia merged with the Hungarian king in 1102. So for most of our history, we had no self-government. We were ruled from outside of Croatia. So we should take sovereignty obviously seriously. We paid a heavy price to earn our freedom in the 1990s. We were able to liberate our country from Serb occupation in 1995. And so the country has come a long way, but now serving in the European Parliament, I see from within how the European Union works, and it's broken. It's broken, frankly. I'll give you one example. I sit in the Committee for Fisheries, and the left and the Greens are more concerned for the welfare of fish than they are for the fishermen. The European Union imports over 70% of the fish we consume from abroad because we've basically suffocated our own fishermen and made it too difficult to fish. So this is one example, and the green agenda, which has still this strong grip over the People's Party and the left, of course, they are not willing to abandon these policies that are harming Europe. So Croatia seems perhaps on the margins of this, but we're part of Europe since 2013. I've been fighting for pro-family policies. We have now a constitutional amendment defining marriage as a union between one man and one woman. We as conservatives should not yield an inch to the left when it comes to culture. So we are obviously for prosperity. We have to keep the government limited. We have to keep regulation under control, taxes low when possible. But we must also fight for a culture which can withstand the assault from the left. They simply hate the family. They're attacking, I would say, the heritage of Western civilization on a daily basis, and we must be ready to persevere because this battle will not be won overnight.
Now we have the ability to showcase them that there is a strong rejection globally for this cultural war. Barbara, you mentioned that we are basically not only think tanks anymore, but do tanks, and you are a champion of, let's say, a policy-driven cooperation with your free market roadshow, and we became part of that movement as Economus. And you know, we are constantly debating and discussing how the European Union became basically a centralized power, like back in the socialist communist times. That is why we are losing competitiveness. What do you think, how can we combat that sort of centrally planned economy and how to get back to the world market as a competitive continent again?
Well, get rid of planification, get rid of these people who really want to put communism back on stage. And central planning is nothing else but that. If we look back at Hayek, 80 years ago, he wrote this famous book, The Road to Serfdom. And we are, unfortunately, already on the road to serfdom. Actually, we're in the middle of it. Because Brussels has taken over powers. The powers, they will soon have the power to tax, not only the power to create debt, individual debt, and then now they want the central bank digital currency, the digital euro, and all those things that are a big threat to our individual freedom and liberties. And if we allow this one-size-fits-all policies to outmaneuver the voices of reason, those individuals who stand up and fight for their own countries and for their own values, and continue the wokeness that they serve because they are just simply power greedy, we will go down the drain. But there is a light on the tunnel, at the end of the tunnel, because, as you mentioned, there are think tanks and groups and political action committees, as CPAC is, to unite and to work together and find our common denominator is freedom, is ultimate freedom, our individual freedom. And so I think this has been on the mindset. If we look at the shift of the recent European elections, there was center-right this is growing. I mean, in Austria, the Freedom Party had a landslide victory last year. People would never have believed that this is possible. And now we're over 30% in the polls. And it continues because people understand ultimately what it means if freedom is taken away. And I think the countries that used to be behind the Iron Curtain understand it even better. So we need to unite with the Central and Eastern European friends to fight that, because I think France, Spain, those countries are lost more or less to these moral high grounds that we have to defend. In other words, inform people of the negative consequences that this power-greedy individuals in Brussels, the bureaucracy, has. By the way, none of them has been elected. I mean, the commissioner has not been elected by us, and she still, I think, uses her powers as if she were the Queen of Europe, and she's not.
So basically, we should get back from a political union to a solely economic union. That is the main achievement and result what we have achieved in the past decades. And let's get back to South Africa. There was a really interesting meeting between President Ramaphosa and President Trump. It was maybe as interesting as the meeting between Zelensky and Trump. My question is, what is or what was the impact on the Afrikaner community that Trump basically faced President Ramaphosa with the persecution of Afrikaners in South Africa?
Yeah, thank you. So firstly, we are not happy about the crisis in South Africa. We are very sad about what's happening in South Africa. But given that that is the reality, we are very happy that it was exposed in the way that it was. And we are very grateful for the step that President Trump took and the boldness to actually play that video for the world to see. What was quite remarkable was to witness the media response to that, because on the one hand, it's not possible anymore to deny the extent of the crisis in South Africa. And the support we see flooding in from all over the world is something that we cherish and we value. But what was quite remarkable was to see how the media and some people in the mainstream media are trying to frame what has happened there. And my personal favorite was one of the biggest news outlets in South Africa saying that the reason why President Trump played that video was because he's jealous of the South African president, and because he sees in President Ramaphosa everything that he aspires to be but will never be. And so that was quite remarkable to witness that type, the fact that they would go that far to frame that in a particular narrative. But what we should say about South Africa is that what President Trump exposed there is true. The farm killings is a reality. If you live on a farm in South Africa or you come from a farming community, you know people who have been attacked or killed. If you look at it statistically, if you take a period of 2 decades, according to the police statistics, there were on average 2 farm attacks every day and 2 farm murders every week in South Africa, over 2 decades. Then we have the race laws. We have more than 140 race laws in South Africa aimed at discriminating against white people because of our Western heritage. Then on top of that, we have the South African government now having just signed the Expropriation Act, according to which they seek to have the power to confiscate private property without compensation. And the funny thing there is then they would justify that by saying, no, it's not without compensation, it's with compensation, but compensation is zero. That's how they describe it. And then the other problem on top of that is just government collapse in South Africa, that the government have all these crazy socialist ideas, but when it comes to fulfilling their basic duties, they're not able to do that, which just underlines why it's so important for us to promote alternative and pursue alternative solutions, decentralizing the political system and promoting self-governance for the communities or the nations living within South Africa.
Thank you. And we have 1 minute left. Stephen, you are an MEP, and there are 2 major groups on the right, ECR and Patriots, which are not forming a joint coalition and faction. But what do you think, what are the most important topics on which these two groups can enhance their cooperation in the future of the remaining 4 years of the European Parliamentary term?
So I think both our groups want to make Europe great again. We maybe have different approaches, but there's many areas we can agree on. You know, in European politics, it's easy to find a reason why not to collaborate, but I'm always I'm pushing this idea to bring our two groups closer, because we have to be also pragmatic in politics. For all of you who are interested in how the elites run Brussels, I can suggest a book written by a great social philosopher in America, Thomas Sowell. He wrote a book called The Vision of the Anointed in the mid-90s, and it's really a great elaboration of how the elites, the liberal left elites, see themselves as morally superior and fit to really rule over others. And it's something that they will not leave easily. They have a firm grip on power now. We see censorship and other attempts to retain power, and I think the people are seeing the truth slowly but surely, and the future, I would say, is on our side. The conservatives and the patriots will eventually prevail.
Thank you so much. I could continue this discussion for hours. Thank you for your cooperation. Barbara Kolm and Stephen Bartulica, thank you for your attention.